Why, hello. Good morning. Here in San Francisco, it is afternoon, so good afternoon or good evening wherever you guys are dialing in from. I'm going to do a quick sound check. Looks like the mic's working on my side. Looks like the audio is working from what I can tell, but let me know if you guys have any issues hearing me or if there's anything up with the audio, and I'll double check. Really excited for today's webinar. This is the first one we've done in a while for notebooks. I like to call this one the Bob Ross style webinar. We walk through, similar to Bob Ross does, painting through some of those pictures and showing how easy it is to get started. We do the same exact thing on notebooks here at Julius. If this is your first time tuning in, we do these webinars twice a week. We do onboarding webinar every week. And then we also do these deep dive series, whether it's notebooks, data connectors, even ones that we had in Spanish last week with my colleague Simon as well. We're going to wait a few more minutes for folks to trickle in. We'll get started shortly, but if you guys have any questions, let me know. I did share in the chat the drive to the files that we'll be using in today's webinar. If you guys don't have access to files that you want to use, or maybe you want to try out Julius without using your own data, feel free to give those ones a shot. Those are the same exact files I'll be using in the notebooks today. And likewise, I also shared the code BobRoss25. I'll walk through how you could redeem this, but it's basically to give you guys Julius Pro, just so you guys can get the most out of today's workshop, but also for the rest of the week as well, for 7 days at least. How's everyone's, what day? Oh my God, today's Tuesday. Everyone's Tuesday going. Is it Tuesday where you guys are at? Okay, let's go ahead and get started here. I have this screen up. I'm going to switch over to my Julius window. If you guys haven't already, you guys can go to your account. So if you go to, let's see here, where am I at? If you go to accounts here in the upper right, and you go to accounts, upper left, and you go to account settings, you'll see under subscription, under account, you could redeem the code that I mentioned before. Just put in Bob Ross 25, and then you should be able to accept it. You can't see this on my screen because I've already accepted this on this account. Again, that's Bob Ross 25 for today's webinar. It's Wednesday in India. Okay, right on. Really early morning for you, huh? Nice. All right. With that being said, let's go over to our notebooks page. This is where we're going to be doing most of the work today. If you click on notebooks here in the upper left corner, this shows you all of the notebooks that you've created, and all accounts will have a couple of notebooks that say like welcome to Julius and maybe a demo notebook already made inside of it. But this is essentially the home of all of our notebooks. What is a notebook, right? I think that's something that a lot of folks ask. I like to think of notebooks as like a cookbook, right? It's a collection of different prompts, different cells that makes up the analysis that we want to do, right? It's a cookbook for a couple of reasons, right? It's easy to iterate on it. So as you're doing your analysis over time, you could update those cells, you could reorder the cells, you could even change the type of cells, something that we'll walk through today. And like a cookbook, it's easy to follow over and over again. You know, if you want to run this analysis again another time, or you want to share it with someone, they could easily recreate the results that you had done in your first try with the notebook. So that's why I like to call it a cookbook more so than a notebook, but notebooks is what we called it. If you're familiar with notebooks like Jupyter Notebooks, it's very similar, but in this case, we've really just baked in Julius and all the different features alongside it to make it just a superpowered notebook, if you will. So it's been pretty cool to see some of the more technical data science users use it because it is a friendly notebook environment. In this webinar, we'll try to make it a little bit easy for us non-technical folks, especially myself, who aren't as tech savvy or don't know how to write code. Notebooks can be a really great way for you to get a lot out of Julius. Awesome. Cool. So I shared the link to the drive. What we'll do is we'll make a new notebook, and I'll do this by clicking in the upper left-hand corner here. I'll click New, and then I'll click on Notebook. This will bring up the same exact notebook default template is what I like to call it, which is a cell here, which we call a source cell and also a prompt cell. And we'll talk about both of those in a minute. But this is the default notebook UI. Any new notebook will start out with these two building blocks, if you will. A source cell is a way for you to add data to Julius, right? Typically in our chats UI, you could do this by clicking on the plus icon, adding in files directly, connecting your data sources. It's no different in a notebook as well. This is the source cell, and you can see the name of the cell in the upper right-hand corner. It says source. And here we see the add data sources button. When you click on this, you'll see all of the different files that we could upload to Julius. Likewise, you'll also see any data connectors that you have set up. If you're not familiar with data connectors, we covered this in some of the other webinars. We have those all recorded in our YouTube down below. But here in this example, I also have Postgres, which is something that I've connected to in the past. But in today's webinar, I'm going to use those files that I had shared that are pinned in the comments. That is our sales transactions, customer demographics, product catalog, and then also the marketing campaigns, those 4 files. Right, so I'm going to select all 4 of those. I'm going to click the Done button up here, and Julius will add all 4 of those to this notebook. And that's the source cell. It's the fundamental cell. You can't really do anything in a notebook without a source cell, just like you can't do any analysis without any data. Same exact thing here. So what I've just done is I've added in those 4 cells those 4 sheets directly to this notebook in the source cell. You could also connect your Google Drive too. If you have your Google Drive connected, you could add from here, and then you could sign in and also connect files that way if you want. All right, so that's the source cell. Again, very fundamental. It's a key part of every notebook. The next one we have is our prompt cell, and this is essentially just the chat bar. You could just tell Julius what you want to do, what type of analysis you want to run, what sort of visualization you want to make. All of it is done within the prompt bar. So every single notebook probably comprises of 99% of prompt bars and 1% of source cells. Really, really easy. It's pretty much where the workhorses of the notebook, if you will. All right, so I have this one here. Let's add in our files together. We added those in the source cell. And now I'm going to tell Julius to just load and preview the data. One of my most common prompts I'll run. So I'll type in load and preview the data, if I can type. I have my prompt typed out here. You could press Command and Enter if you're on a Mac. You can press Shift and Enter if you're on a PC, or you can click on the Run button up here in the upper left-hand corner. And this will essentially send that prompt to Julius. And Julius is going to write the code needed to fulfill it, and it's going to run the code in our environment, just like you would in a chat. All right, so here Julius is again generating the Python code needed to load and preview the data. It's doing it for all 4 of those different sheets. And then it's going to give me a preview of those tables, and here we go. I've successfully loaded all 4 data sets. Here's what we have. All right, so we have the first one for sales transactions, the next one for customer demographics, let's see if Julius keeps on going, or did my thing freeze? Let's see here. It looks like it's still running. There we go. I'm going to close some windows here. I think I have a few too many windows open. All right, customer demographics, product catalog, and then marketing campaign. So it did essentially what I asked it to do. It loaded and previewed the data. The cool thing about these cells is you could simply collapse the outputs if you wanted to. So there's a button up here in the upper right-hand corner. You could just click this and make everything go away. Or you could show everything if you do want to see all the outputs too. The other key thing that I like to do with notebooks is just keep the Data Explorer open. Data Explorer, if you're unfamiliar, is just an easy way to see all of the underlying data that is powering the analysis, the visualizations, basically what is Julius actually working with. To do this, you can either click on the right-hand button. In the upper right-hand corner, you'll see this one little window-looking icon, and this will pop out the Data Explorer. And then here you can see all 4 of those different files that I just uploaded now inside of Julius. The other way that you could do this is by clicking on the expand button above any table that Julius shows you. It'll open up the respective data frame there. This is useful for a couple of reasons, right? I like to keep open the Data Explorer to first double check the work that Julius is doing, just the same way as you would open up, a file in Sheets or a file in Excel. I like to see like the columns, the rows, maybe a sample of it. Whenever Julius is making either a visualization or is even just doing the analysis itself. Second, it's also just keep track of what Julius is doing. If it's making any changes to the data, right? If it's filtering based off of a certain criteria you gave it, or maybe you're deleting or removing columns, it's always good to just keep an eye on it, just like you would any other data analyst if you were watching the work that they're doing. In this example, I'm just going to collapse this whole window. I want to get this out of the way, so I'm going to collapse the outputs here just to show us this next part. You could, just like Threads, use one of these suggested next prompts if you wanted to, if you didn't really know what you wanted to ask next. But in this case, I'm just going to add in another cell. I'm going to do this by hovering on the very bottom here, this next bar, and just clicking on cell, and I'll add in a new cell there. The next one I'll do is I'm going to just tell Julius to look for any structure issues, right? Anytime that I'm working with multiple sheets or maybe a data set that I'm not as familiar with, I always want to double check if there's anything wrong with it. Something that I'll typically do in most of the notebooks I'm working on. So I'll tell Julius here, can you look for any issues with the data? We'll say look for any inconsistent formatting, timestamps, maybe duplicate rows, and fix them for analysis. A lot of times that's actually going to cause a lot of issues, right? A lot of times when users reach out to us like, hey, Julius really did struggle with the visualization, most times it's because something was off with the data that it was working with, right? Julius will try its best to visualize things, and especially some of the data that you give it. But if the data is inconsistently structured, maybe there's missing rows or missing columns, if you don't clean the data before you have Julius do that, it's going to come up with some wonky looking visualization sometimes, at least in most of the cases that I've ran into issues. So in most of the notebooks I run, these are pretty much the first 3 steps I'll do. First, add in the data. Second, load and preview the data. And then third, fix anything wrong with the data, just as a prerequisite before I'd really dive in and do my analysis. I do this for everything, even for ones where I think I'm pretty sure about the data. Oftentimes there can be something wrong, whether it's like a timestamp that's not the right format, or maybe it's just inconsistent, structuring of the data, even if it's ones that I'm more familiar with too. So that's why I always run this. All right, so we can see Julius running through all these different steps. Again, if you're not familiar, you could just read the explanation of the code to see what Julius is doing. So here Julius is checking for duplicate rows. Let's see, this one, it found some inconsistencies. So here it's going to identify and report any inconsistencies. And then you can see here, this code snippet addresses those inconsistencies by using timestamps, etc. So basically just getting the data ready for analysis. This data is all synthetic data. It's data that I put together for this webinar specifically. So there are structure issues sort of baked into it, similar to ones that you would see in any sort of data. It's common for folks to use like Sheets and Excel and have manually structured data that they use on a day-to-day and then try to put into Julius. So in those cases, it's always good to just double check to see if there's any structure issues. All right, so Julius is getting back to us. It says data quality issues found and fixed. Duplicate transaction IDs, very uncommon for there to be duplicate transaction IDs. So Julius had fixed those. Inconsistent date and timestamps, Julius fixed those as well. And then a couple of other things that it had done to prepare the data for analysis. I would say at this point, we're ready to go. I'm really happy with this result. Again, same thing I did before. I'm just going to hide these outputs. I don't really want to see all 25 outputs there. So far, we've talked about adding in cells using this bottom bar. There's another way that you could do this, which is using this bar on the very bottom, this little menu. You could treat this just like your prompt cell. And here I'm going to type in, let's do some exploratory data analysis. Also known as EDA, it's a common type of analysis that data analysts will do just to get an overview of the data, see if there's any relationships or trends before really diving deep. So I'll say, let's do some exploratory data analysis, look for any interesting trends or insights. That's it. Okay, and then I'm going to press this blue button here, and it's going to create a new cell for me and run it automatically. So a couple of different ways that you could add in cells as you're doing the analysis with Julius. While this is going, we'll add in one more cell, right? And that's the really cool thing about Julius in notebooks, is that you don't have to just work linearly. You don't have to just work in one direction and just add on more and more cells at the very end. The cool thing is you could add in cells at any point inside of this analysis, right? So maybe we'll talk about this next type of cell, which is a text cell. A text cell is essentially just a markdown cell. Great way for you to add in notes, comments, or even things like videos or formulas if you want to just keep this inside of your notebook to either remind yourself or remind whoever's using the notebook later. So I just added in a text cell, and I'll say, this is my webinar notebook. We are analyzing product and customer data. You can preview this to see what it looks like, or you can click out of it and that's how it'll show too. Again, it's all marked down, so you could use any sort of formatting that you want to. Here I'm going to add in a couple of pound signs, and then also say, we made this webinar on, or sorry, this notebook on November 11th, Veterans Day, here in the US. And there you go. So I do this for a couple of reasons. I like to add in notes, especially if I'm working on a notebook I'm going to be sharing with people. Add in some context just so that you could sort of explain what you're doing, or just keep notes for your own reference later. I have notebooks that I've ran several hundreds of times, and sometimes I forget why I have a cell in there for whatever reason, or what does this code actually do. You could add in cells regardless of what type in between as well. It doesn't just have to be text cells. You could add in another prompt cell if you wanted to. Or you could add in what we'll talk about later is a code cell if you wanted to. And you could run them all out of order. It doesn't really matter in a notebook. All right, let's go back to see what Julius is working on. So we have it running the exploratory data analysis, and here's some key insights. It showed us revenue trends over time. Here it even visualized those. Looked at some sales channel performance, so maybe what are the different ways people are buying some of our products. And then even specific product category performance, and also the customer loyalty impact. It's all these different ways that Julius had at least did a high-level overview of the data before really diving deep. Time-based analysis, some revenue by day of the week, revenue by hour of the day, and even some findings as well. So lunch hours are peak shopping times. That makes sense. And then also noon is the highest single revenue hour as well. Let's try to do a really cool visualization. I'm going to go here at the very bottom, and I'm going to type in, let's make a histogram showing sales by customer demographic. And we'll just run this one, and we'll see what it's able to create. All right, so here we go. So Julius had made at least a first version of the visualization. As it's working, you can always click into these images and it'll pop out the window in the right side, so just so you can get a preview of what it's about to print out. I like to do this just to say, like, oh, this is what Julius is working on in the side. So here we see the total sales by age group, total sales by gender, also bracket by income, and then also total sales by customer type. And here we have Julius printing out those results here. Transaction value distribution by demographics, age group distribution, etc. All right, let's say I wanted to pivot, right? Maybe I don't want a histogram. Maybe I instead want a stacked bar chart. I'll say You can actually go back to that prompt that we just ran, that cell. And I'm going to just remove histogram, and I'm going to say stacked bar chart. I'm going to rerun it again. And this, I just like, this is probably the best part about notebooks is if you ever have a prompt you want to redo or you want to undo, or maybe something goes wrong with Julius and doesn't print out the results that you're looking for, it's super easy to update what you had wrote just by rewriting the individual cell itself and rerunning it. So let's try this again, and we'll see how Julius makes a stacked bar chart here. All right. Again, I'm just going to click in there and take a look at what it's doing. Yeah, it's a stacked bar chart, just as I expected. All right, so here we go. So it's sales by customer demographics, and this time it just gave us a stacked bar chart, again, by breaking down by age group and gender, age group and income. Well, I like this chart. It's a nice one. Then also revenue by income bracket as well. So far we've covered the two main cells, right? We've talked about source cells, how you upload files and connect your data. Then also the prompt cells, basically how do you tell Julius what you wanted to work on? What if we wanted to do a code cell? Let's talk about this one. Here I'm going to hover at the very bottom, and I'm just going to click on code. We support 3 different types of code within a notebook. We do Python, which is the main language that Julius does to generate all these visualizations and do all of the analysis. We also support SQL, so if you ever do connect directly to your data source, whether it's Postgres, BigQuery, or some other data warehouse, you can also query it that way. Or if you're a power user and you know how to use R, you could use R as well. So you could type in that language here in the code cell. Why are code cells useful, right? Well, first, if you are more technical, it makes it easy to just write out what you want Julius to do, or take something from your own existing Jupyter notebook and plug it into Julius, right? If you're non-technical like myself, the main reason why I use code cells in notebooks is to make it really easy to reproduce results and to sort of lock in the way that Julius will visualize or do the analysis without needing to regenerate the code, right? To recap what that means, so if I were to type this prompt again, and if I were to run the same exact cell, more often than not, Julius will actually come up with a different way to visualize it or to do the analysis, right? It's because these models are non-deterministic. There's no one way to do or to fulfill this prompt of let's make a stacked bar chart. In fact, there's probably a whole bunch of different ways, even if it's small things like changing the way the visualization is, like the bar sizes, or maybe the axis sizes or the axis labeling, right? Or maybe Julius will choose to print out, 4 different types of bar charts, Oftentimes you'll probably get different results because these models are, again, non-deterministic. To get around this, though, you could simply just take in the code. So I'm just going to copy this guy. Actually, we'll try one like, let me see this one here where it actually created a visualization. I'm just going to copy this. In here on the code cell, I could just paste it. And now when I run this, Julius will just print out those same exact results here that we see. So again, if I ever wanted to do this analysis in the future, or I wanted to get the same exact visualization but with updated data, right? Maybe I have an updated sales sheet that I want to connect to. Using the code itself will make sure that the results are exactly the same way that I had it when I first ran the notebook, right? So this is one way that you could use the code cells. But there's another way that you could also do this, right? If I go back up to my prompt here, again, I told Julius, let's make a stacked bar chart showing sales by customer demographic. I could also click on this little stamp icon here. You'll see this says turn into repeatable steps. This will pop out this window showing me what that prompt cell did. So here you can see all of those different cells that Julius had just wrote in the visualizations. And what this right side shows is if we were to separate out all of that code and just lock everything into place, how it was. And here you can see that prompt I wrote. So let's make a stacked bar chart. All of the code that Julius had generated. If I were to click accept 6 changes, we essentially just lock in all of that code So next time, Julius won't be generating new code. It'll just be running through that same code that it had ran before. Really, really useful, especially when you're wanting the same exact results week over week, right? Internally, we do analysis on our, like some of our marketing data. Instead of generating a new visualization, I actually just want the same charts just with last week's data. So in that notebook, it looks exactly like this. I have the analysis done, but the code is all locked into place. I don't regenerate any new code because I want everything to look pretty much the same as it did last week and week over week. So that's the code cell. The only other way that I would recommend using code cells is if you take any sort of analysis that Julius has done or some sort of query, you could also throw that into ChatGPT or throw it into Claude, or even take something that Julius had written in a chat and you could throw that into a code cell and just run it here too, which is really, really handy. Those are the main cells that we'll talk about. There's one other cell that you could add in, which is the user input. It's probably used 0.001% of the time. But to give you just a brief overview, you could ask the user, whoever's using your notebook, whether it's you yourself or someone that you're sharing the notebook with, for their input, right? And then you could use their input to influence how Julius is going to do the analysis, for example, right? So for example, here I could ask the user, what type of chart should we make next? And then here you could instruct Julius to make the chart that the user specified. If unspecified, make the best chart to visualize their data in an interesting way. So this first part is, what is the question you want to ask the user? The user will type in their answer to that, and then here's how Julius is going to interpret their answer, right? So in here, I could just say, let's make a pie chart. And I'll run it. And then now Julius will make a pie chart. Pretty straightforward how that works. It's probably not as commonly used. I use it in some of my notebooks, especially when I want, an output in different formats, and just makes it an easy way to just add in, like maybe if I want Julius to make me a CSV or an Excel file, I could just type it in here without needing to make a prompt cell telling Julius to make me an Excel file, right? That's the main use case that I've seen. Those are some really cool, look at these pie charts. It's like 3D. I didn't expect it to do some drop shadow, but that's a pretty nice pie chart if I've ever seen one. Maybe it's because I put the exclamation point, but that's a really nice pie chart. Always surprised by some of these outputs from Julius, especially when the visualizations are just getting better. That's the cool thing about these webinars. You could look back at some of the webinars that we ran like back in June and just see how much the product has progressed. You could also see how the outputs have progressed too. I think sometimes these visualizations look a lot better than when I first started doing these webinars. Okay, so to recap what we've done so far, we've added in our data. So those are the 4 example sheets that we connected earlier. We loaded and previewed them, cleaned them up looking for any data structure issues, did some exploratory data analysis, created the stacked bar chart and reran it actually, and then locked in all the code. So everything's going to look exactly the same. And then we added in a user input cell so we could try out making any different type of charts that we want to. Cool. So let's imagine like, hey, we're done with this analysis, right? The first thing I would do is go to the upper top here. Here we see notebooks, and then we see the / and this is our current notebook that we're in right now. By default, it's going to be the date and then also the timestamp that we made it. I'm going to click on it. And then here's where you could add in some details, just to make it a little more descriptive. So I'll say, this is my webinar notebook on Veterans Day. And then you can add in a description. So we made this notebook in a webinar, and we did some analysis, structure / cleaning, and then also some, what else do we do? Visualizations. You could also add in custom instructions if you wanted to. Again, this is something that's specific for this notebook. You could tell Julius, hey, I want you to calculate things a specific way, or maybe you want Julius, to remember some of your business use case or some of the work that you're doing. You could add in that here, and Julius will keep this in mind throughout all of the different cells that you're running. You could also add some tags if you want to make this a really descriptive notebook and make it easy to find later. And finally, you could add a cover image too, and this is useful for if you ever want to publish this or share it with someone else. All right, and then now if I go back to my notebooks page, you'll see this notebook that we just made. Then all you have to do is click on Run. And now we could redo this analysis using fresh data, right? And this time I don't have to reprint or rewrite any of the prompts that I made. I'll just start with exactly what I ran at the beginning of the webinar. We'll go through all those different steps. So here I'll just add in the files. Press the check mark. Then now I'm just going to press Run All, and then you'll see Julius is able to just go through all those different ones without me needing to watch over it, right, if you will. So this is very handy if you, again, do analysis every week. We have a meeting every week that we go over specific metrics. I have to update some slides. I use this notebook to update those slides instead of me needing to do it automatically, or do it manually. All right, so Julius is going through, and again, it's going to load and preview and go through all of those different steps. In terms of just getting the most out of notebooks, using manual files like CSVs or Excels, it's enough to get by, at least in your first couple of analysis, or if you really are limited in what you can do with your data, nothing wrong with using those. But I would highly recommend trying to connect to your data connectors. Here I'm going to open this up in a new tab. These are, again, all the different ways that you could pull data directly into Julius. And the reason why I mention this is it's even more empowering and impactful when you can connect your notebook directly to live data, right? So I have my Postgres connector here. You have our most common ones like BigQuery, Snowflake, even other ones like Google Ads and Meta Ads. You can connect to directly and just give Julius a direct line to your data. Why is that useful, right? Imagine if I wanted to run this notebook again. Maybe I want this to be already refreshed for me before I even come into the office every Monday. Doing it with manual spreadsheets really isn't the best because you still have to upload those. There's no direct way to pull a spreadsheet from somewhere right now. The best way you could do it is by connecting directly to your BigQuery and having Julius grab the data for you and query for it, and then running the analysis all on its own without you needing to be there to watch over it. So here we see Julius, again, generating through all of that code. Here's restructuring it, etc. All right. Julius is going to keep on running through this just the same way. On that same topic that I was just talking about, let's talk about scheduling, right? Scheduling is a great part of notebooks. Again, once you do connect to a data connector, they really do work hand in hand. If you go back to our main notebook, this is by clicking on the middle bar here, the webinar notebook, Veterans Day. In the upper right-hand corner, you can click on schedule. You could select daily, weekly, monthly, how often you want this notebook to be ran and have the results delivered to you. You could select the specific time zone. And if you, like many other teams out there, are on Slack, you could also have Julius deliver the results of this notebook directly to a Slack channel by enabling this and then selecting the channel you want it to go to. Once you have everything set, just click on Test Now, and then Julius will actually run through, again, all those different steps, do the analysis for you, and then send the results to your inbox when everything's ready or to the Slack channel that you specified. Here it's not able to do it, again, because we built this notebook around uploading files manually. But if you've connected your data connector to it, Julius will be able to go through and update your metrics automatically. The last thing I'll share about notebooks is in the upper right-hand corner. Just like in our threads feature, you can generate an analysis report. What this will do is it's going to take all of the key insights that we generated. That's like the findings from Julius. That's the specific callouts of things that it identified, any of the visualizations, and it's going to take away all of our prompts things that we told Julius to do or the code that it ran and make it into something that's a little bit easier to share, right? Something that we can give to our team, share in Slack, or even download as a PDF too. So we'll see what Julius is able to cook up here. All right, and then here you can see we first analyzed those 4 data sets, fixed some data issues. Here's those visualizations that we made, those cool pie charts that we made, and then also some final findings too. All of this is in Markdown, so the cool thing is you could press Edit, and you could take out or update any of these sections that you want to. As I mentioned before, you could just download as a PDF if this is something you just want to share. Or you could even just share the link to this as well. Giving someone the link here will just bring them to this report. And the cool thing is they could also look at the source, aka your notebook that you had used to create this analysis. Finally, the other cool things that you could do, you could download the actual notebook itself. So if you want to download as a Jupyter notebook, you can click on this, and it'll save all of those different cells that we had made. And then likewise, if you want to ever, create a notebook, not from scratch, you could import this up here in the upper left. And you could import that exact Jupyter notebook or whatever notebook that you've used in the past. And that's it. That's pretty much all I want to cover for notebooks. It really is a little bit of a steeper learning curve than Threads, but I think it's actually really easy to use, right? The key thing is just using the source cells that we used before, and then the prompt cells, and that's exactly how you could interact with Julius, just like you can in our chats feature. It's just here, it's a lot easier, and there's a lot more functions and features that we've built just to make iterating on analysis or changing the order of your analysis or adding in cells before and after what you've done before there. So that's one of the biggest reasons. And again, I think the other biggest selling point is just the ability to recreate the analysis that you've done without needing to literally recreate it manually. You can just rerun the same exact notebook, update the data, whether it's manually by adding in sheets or Excel files, or connecting directly to your data source there. If you need any other tips or tricks here, we have our docs in the upper left-hand corner. There's this little book icon. And then it takes you to our notebooks page. We have several videos here. Also, a breakdown of all the different types of cells, different features within notebooks, including some of the ones we talked about today. Then finally, the last thing I'll share is our notebooks templates page. This has all of the different notebooks that either folks who use Julius or folks on the Julius team have created that you could simply use to do this type of analysis without needing to make all the steps yourself. So if you're in marketing and you want to look at your acquisition channel efficiency, you could run this notebook. All you have to do is plug in your data and just run through the cells there, which is really easy to get started. Likewise, if you're in a chat, for example, if I were to start a brand new chat, you could also click here at the very bottom. There's start from a template, and there's several notebooks that we have all built out, including some ones that we just made recently for marketing. So you could do customer segmentation analysis, or if you wanted to do like acquisition channel efficiency, the one that we just showed earlier, you could just do this all from the chat interface. Awesome. I want to take a few seconds here. Any questions or any comments from folks? Again, just as a thank you, again, you could use that code that I shared earlier, which is BobRoss25 if you want to try out Julius Pro for free for 7 days. Feel free to reach out if you have any questions and let us know how you like it. Again, hopefully this helps empower you guys to use notebooks. I do think it's one of the best features we have. Just for doing your iterative analysis, chats is great for just doing one-off asks or doing really quick things. But just having a notebook is definitely a little bit easier to iterate on and recreate the results over time. Awesome. I want to say thank you again so much for joining. Hopefully we'll see you in the next webinar. You could subscribe to our YouTube to find out whenever our next webinars are coming up. Also, you can subscribe to our Illuma, how most folks RSVP'd for today's webinar. We'll have ones every week that we go through, from our onboarding ones to different ones that we run through. I want to say thanks again. Hope you have a great rest of your morning, day, or evening, wherever you're tuning in from, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you.